The people's business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Welcome to the People's Business. We do apologize for the delayed start. Tonight we delve into the topic of fatherhood and the role of male parents in today's world. Fathers play a crucial role in the development of their children, providing love, support, and guidance that are essential for their well-being. However, in many Caribbean households, fathers are often absent or not actively involved in their children's lives. According to a study conducted by the Caribbean Development Research Services, over 40% of children in the Caribbean grow up in single-parent households, with the majority being raised by their mothers. This lack of male presence can have far-reaching consequences, affecting children's emotional and social development. That's what we're discussing tonight. Joining us are Fabian Sargeant, head of the Men's Education Network Support, MENS, and Jomo Phillips, a respective couples and family therapist. Now, after the break, we'll explore the importance of fatherhood and the impact it has on our communities. Stay with us. Welcome back. Good to have you with us. Remember, we're going to at some point ask you to come on in and share with us as well, calling us on 228-5562 and 228-5563. We know usually you have lots of comments to share with us and maybe some questions for our esteemed guests joining us today. So good evening to you, gentlemen. Good to have you on this evening's presentation.
Hi, good evening. It is indeed a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, same here.
All right, let me start with you, Fabian. Can you share with us some insights on the current state of fatherhood in the Caribbean from where you sit with the men's organization?
So the current situation with men is much brighter than it was 10, 15, even 20 years ago. Fathers are playing a greater role in the lives of their children. Fathers are being a lot more present, even though we have instances of fatherlessness in some households. The general environment has changed tremendously. We've seen fathers even being at schools, extracurricular activities, within the medical institutions, next to their partners or their wives, girlfriends, during pregnancy at doctor visits. And these things are very different from what we would have seen, as I said, 10, 15, even 20 years ago. So even though there is still a high degree of fatherlessness and some fathers being absent from the home, and sometimes that absence is not even purposeful because of a breakdown in relationship, and these fathers are not allowed to be around their children. Even though we have that, there is still a general improvement in fathers and fatherhood and the role that they've been playing in their children's lives in a contemporary environment.
All right, with that improvement that you're seeing, Jomo, as a family therapist, how do you see the role of the male parent evolving in today's society? We know it has changed, and as we look at many studies, they show how things like machismo that's very current and very popular in this part of the world in terms of how men are perceived as in their traditional roles as the winner of the breadwinner, and women in their traditional roles as the nurturers, how that has helped to kind of take men away from really engaging with their children. So, how has the role of that male parent, the father, evolved in today's society?
Mm. I certainly think, Tisha, that there's been some shifts in terms of culture. So I do agree with Fabian in terms of men being more involved in terms of fatherhood. I think that has been just sort of the ways that men are being socialized and the values are changing in terms of the society. But we still struggle as well too in terms of um, expectations around what men are supposed to look like. And one of those things, of course, is to be sort of stern, is to be distant, is to be disconnected from children and family life. Yeah. So there are two different currents that are happening at the same time. More inclusion, but at the same time, values around men and distance and uninvolvement.
Fabian, are there any trends or challenges that you've observed in your work with men outside of what we talked about with you and then with Jomo in terms of how men are viewed in a traditional kind of light?
Tisha, that question is a very serious question, and to be honest, there's very little regard for fathers and men across the society. There's a lot of negativity whenever you hear fatherhood, and we've just had Father's Day, and the headlines. I remember I gave a address to the St. Cyprian's Church, and that address was about celebrating men, but the headlines read toxic environment, step up, dad's urge. So there's still this negative type of perception of men, even though we try to create a shift to focus on the positive aspects of fatherhood and trying to paint men in a better light, because as I said, there have been a lot of positives. There's been a shift in terms of what fathers are doing, but it seems as if there's this general type of current that is still pushing us back. And, from a professional standpoint, when I speak to people, a lot of this negativity comes from maybe pain and hurt and resentment from childhood. And even the people, let's say in the media, adults in what we would consider as big positions, a lot of these people would, over the years, would have had very, I guess, shaky relationships with their father, and it is really, really plain no, like, no, that we're trying to shift to a real positive standpoint. We are still getting that negativity across the board for men. So, and that perception is not really good, because then we have our young boys who will be fathers shortly, who are watching and looking on. And we need to really change the narrative, not only from the social standpoint, but from the media, from social media, print media, you know, young people. Media usually drives the sentiment within the society, and if we have media pushing a particular agenda because negativity sells, then we're going to be like spinning top in mud.
All right, a lot said there. We're going to take a break and come back and try to dissect a lot more of what you said, Fabian, and bring Jomo into the conversation a little bit more as we kind of delve into particular issues that affect fathers in this part of the world. We need to break it down a little bit more. That's all coming up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the People's Business. This evening, we're taking a look at fatherhood, parenting from a male perspective. We have Jomo Phillips with us and Fabian Sargeant. Good to have both of you. Before we went to the break, we were looking at some of the key challenges that fathers in the region, or here in Barbados specifically, might face in fulfilling their role as male parents. And I'm going to toss that out to you, first of all, Jomo. What do you think are some of the very specific things that fathers are facing that could prevent them from stepping into that role?
I think there's a contradiction between the expectations that we give to men in terms of, for example, being leaders in terms of the household and the resources that they have. I mean, and we're moving in the direction of more gender equality, but I think one of the challenges that we teach men the expectation that they're supposed to stand up in terms of being head of the household, providing for families, but very often there's a disconnection between those expectations and what the resources that men have in terms of the community. So a lot of men, unfortunately, economically, are struggling.
Fabian, let me hear you weigh in on that.
Yeah, there is a degree of confusion. Um, and just to mirror what Jomo said regarding the expectations of men within the home and society. Men traditionally have been seen as the breadwinners, those the ones who supposed to go out and bringing the finances, and also seen as the disciplinarians. And that 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 in itself has really put men in a box, and trying to get out of that box I guess to demonstrate that fatherhood is a lot more than finance and discipline, is a real challenge. It is to get partners and people to understand, well, we are emotional beings. We understand, we feel things too. We're humans, and we want to be loved, we want to be cared for. But yet the general sentiment in society is like, man, you're supposed to be hard, you're supposed to be rough and tough. But when you try to demonstrate that caring side, particularly to your children, sometimes a lot of men are complaining that the pushback that they're getting, it is tremendous, especially those men who have to go through the legal system and trying to get access to their child. So many men contact the organization crying, with court orders, trying to see their children, especially for Father's Day, and are unable to do that. So these are some of the challenges that men are facing that are preventing them from really fulfilling their role in a real meaningful way.
Jomo, how then can we challenge these stereotypes and traditional gender norms that are hindering men, fathers, from fully embracing their role as caregivers and nurturers, as we just heard? And of course, it's been discussed in many, many reports. I've read quite a few in preparation for tonight's presentation, and that is the core of what a lot of reports are saying, that the gender roles are really stopping men from fulfilling their duty. So let's break it down a little bit in real terms, apart from just talking about gender roles, so people understand what we mean.
Mm,
Because some might argue, how does a gender role stop
mm,
a man from being a father to his children? So
right.
let's break that
And
down a little bit.
gender's like the air that we breathe, right? It's just all the things that we've learned and values that we've learned that start to shape our behavior. So one, in terms of challenging that, it starts in terms of our socialization experiences. So just start to rethinking how we try to teach men to be men, and recognizing that men are sensitive and they have feelings, and that we want to help men to be able to connect with that part of themselves, and to also be able to sort of connect with just other people as well too. But it's also at the policy level as well too. So we have particular policies, for example, where we give women opportunities for things like maternity leave, where there are provisions specifically in place for women with regards to caregiving and childcare. We also need to make policy changes that include men in terms of that process as well.
All right, your thoughts on that? I know paternity leave policies in the Caribbean are limited compared to maybe global standards. So, from your perspective, Fabian, and based on your everyday interaction with men who are part of your organization, and of course, you're also a social worker. So, in your daily interactions, how does this lack of support for fathers in the workplace affect their ability to be active and engaged parents?
The men are, I guess, family men are men that want to really play an active role in their family and not and if they're not allowed to do that by the workplace, there can be a real damper on the productivity. I can speak even directly for myself. I remember I was given that support. Well, I had to accumulate my vacation time to,
Mm.
to spend with my wife when we got both of our sons. But some men are not that lucky, and it really creates a rift because those first moments in the child's life, those first few months, that is the time when a father is allowed to bond with that child emotionally, where a father is allowed to even bond with the mother of that child. He's allowed to spend time and really, really connect as a family. And when that is not allowed to happen, research have shown that men are less productive. When you have a man that is happy, when you have a man that is contented, and you have a man that knows that his family is settled, he's settled in his mind, and he doesn't have to worry about what's going on at home. He is a lot more productive. And we still fight with these things, right? When my wife was giving birth to my son, there was a nurse who didn't thought that I should have been in the room, and I almost missed that moment. you know so experiencing that was one of the greatest things for me, and spending time even personally with my children in those first couple of weeks, couple of months, has benefited me. And a lot of men wish that they could really, really get that time. So I know that we are moving in the direction of paternity leave. The discussion have been going on for the last few years. It is kind of like in the advanced stages. Um, the challenges, to my understanding, are, I guess, in terms of financing, how it will be paid for. But the discussion is happening, and that is where it starts. And I really want to commend those, I guess, the government for really, really starting that conversation. I know that there are private sector organizations that have already started paternity leave, and men have been benefiting from that. But we do need a greater degree of attention paid to the whole concept of paternity leave.
All right. Now, I know that early on, Fabian kind of alluded to there being a shift in terms of how fathers are viewed. Uh, are men still experiencing major challenges in areas of proving paternity and things like that? I know back in the day across the Caribbean, and we still hear a lot about it. I mean, there's a TV show to that effect. There was much talk about jackets, for example, and it was portrayed in popular culture with music and in film and on stage, where there was much talk about mothers, baby, fathers, maybe. And I think in great deal that took away from a lot of men feeling like they could wholeheartedly move into taking care of their children. Are things like these still major challenges in the advent of DNA testing and all that we're doing, how the world has shifted? Are you still seeing major challenges in these areas, Jomo, when families come to you for therapy?
I think less so, Tisha, and I think you might have started to answer your own question. I mean, one of the things is that we do have the benefit in terms of science, and in terms of paternity and determining paternity, we have facilities in Barbados now that allow for DNA testing.
Fabian.
I I'll tell you from my end, it is still a challenge. It is a challenge. There are men who who question the paternity of their child, and oftentimes when asked for DNA tests, they are faced with the issue of mother saying, "Well, okay, so you're doubting my decision, or you're doubting the fact that this child is yours. You can't see this child anymore." You know, we have men who have been supporting children for years, and then finding out that that child is not their child. And it is still very much present. People don't talk about it much, but I'm telling you, from where I sit, the discussion is very healthy. Um, a lot of men are very concerned, and I guess the challenge for men is the financial component. I know, like years ago, the cost actually has dropped by a lot. I think it's around $800-900 now. Years ago, it was like 1800-$1800. But even though it's about $800, some fathers still struggle with trying to pay that fee. There are men who are put in court and question the paternity, but don't have the resources to really pursue it. And they're in court for a child sometimes that they don't even think is theirs. So it is very real and very present.
Absolutely. Now, you also mentioned, Fabian, about the breakdown in relationships, a lot of the times contributing to men more or less being on the outside. So I'm going to double back this question your way, for you to kind of qualify that statement with the engagement that you have with your membership and other members of society, and the role that that plays in keeping some men away from fulfilling their duties as fathers.
Many men, I mean, I say many because it is a lot. I'm telling you, I get a lot of phone calls from men, sometimes even daily, who are not able to see their children for whatever reason or the other. Most of the time, it is due to a breakdown in that relationship between them and the mother, whether it's that he moved on and he has a new girlfriend and she doesn't like the girlfriend, and the child can't go at his house, and whatever issues they have. And the issues are many, they're very diverse. You know, what that does is that really hurts the child, because the absence of that father from that child's life creates a void. And we have a program called Safe Zone where we work with young boys between the age of 12 and 18 years old. And I am telling you that when these boys get between 13 and 16 years old and the fathers are absent from their lives, these boys become so rebellious and problematic. And mothers are then struggling and then trying to get the fathers, I guess, reintegrated back into the lives of these boys. By that time, a lot of these, and I speak about boys because I work with men and boys, but it also happens to girls as well. But by that time, there's so much hate in the heart of this child. There are boys that I work with who said, "I hate my father." But if they get to understand the real story behind it, it was just that, I guess, due to hurt and whatever, resentment by the mother, that she kept him away, did not adhere to the core orders, and due to that void in that boy's life, and they become very deviant. And they don't. I guess, as I said, that whole idea of a male figure being absent from the life becomes very evident. And we get to see the negative impacts of fathers not being in the lives of these children.
All right, so we have a caller on the line. Let's get you in so that you can share your opinions or pose your questions to the panel. Good evening. Welcome to the People's Business.
Yes, hi, great evening, Tisha. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I hope you are too. Pose
Oh,
your
glad to hear
question.
it. That's wonderful. Yes, thank you very much. Well, with great power comes great responsibility, and you're responsible for this call. Uh, Tisha, I thank the production team for taking my call. I have one question for the panel. This question is for Fabian Sargeant of the Men's Empowerment Network. In terms of, good night to you, sir.
Good night.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good night. In terms of the aspect of the media and men and the link that, like on a show like this, that men play with the media in terms of fathers and trying to communicate positive messages to their children, not only at home but at school, and not only at school but at work, you will note that a child has to get up on mornings, go to school, and then there's a lull period there between back home and after school. So my question is, what about the aspect of having a father enrolled for the school after school, where you have a parenting program for the children who want to engage in an extracurricular activity, but it is like if the children go to work, if the father is there, if you employ like a father chaplain after school, where the children are able to be parented before they get home, so that they don't find themselves in trouble in terms of like even on a area like how you do with the media there, with the men's that pop in network, you would always have the engagement of communication between father and son. So I was just wondering what about the father and children after school, before they get home, so that they're able to be engaged in parenting activities after school before they get home. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for your call. And I think he's speaking to kind of instituting programs that would kind of
Yeah.
bring parents, the male parent, fathers, and children closer together. So we're going to answer that for you. I'll pose it to Jomo when we come back. Stay with us.
Don't you want to depress me? Gosh. Man, display how to get up in the morning.
Mhm.
Welcome back to the People's Business. Joining us this evening to talk about fatherhood, we have Jomo Phillips and Fabian Sargeant. Before we went to break, we had a call, and the caller was talking about programs to be put in place, I guess, whether through civil society, through governmental programs, or through corporate entities to be able to kind of pair men with boys or with their children. He spoke to after school activities and the like. Your take or your response on that, Jomo?
I think one of the things is we need to be aware just the role of fatherless and parentlessness in terms of children's lives. So we know, for example, that when children are sort of separated from their parents, it's a type of trauma. So I know Fabian was mentioning earlier how some young men and young women may act out in terms of behavior that makes sense when people have experienced trauma.
Now,
Yeah,
Fabian,
and when people are separated from their parents, then that makes sense. And this is why it's so important to have connections. We get safety when we have relationships. So I love the idea in terms of more after school programs and to get more men involved in terms of after school.
all right, now, Fabian, research shows that there's a correlation between involved fatherhood and positive outcomes for children, including improved cognitive development and even emotional well being. So, in line with what the guest asked, the caller asked a moment ago, how can organizations like Men's work towards promoting and supporting active fatherhood in Barbados?
So I like the idea of having programs connected to school because that's exactly where the children are. But generally, I think we need to really provide a level of training and support for men. Even though men want to be extremely active, Jomo would have mentioned trauma. Many men are still facing their childhood traumas and it's impacting how they respond as fathers. So even though they want to be the best father and they want to be very active, sometimes how they respond is based on their hurt and trauma as children. So I'm thinking now that we need to maybe get men involved in some training, some emotional regulation type training where they can focus on themselves, where they get to understand who they are, so that even when they now become very involved with their children, that they don't have a type of a repeat of that type of childhood trauma. So we really want to approach the whole concept of parent engagement, positive parent engagement, in a holistic way, where we provide those necessary skills for the men that they can then pass on to their children. And as you said, there are a lot of positive outcomes. Um, and to be honest, we really need a lot more men even being active. We have even like the Boy Scouts. Women are stepping up to be leaders within the Boy Scouts Association. A number of the organizations, even teaching. There are not a lot of men in teaching, and that male figure during the day would have been excellent to really bring a balance to the school environment. So we're also calling on men to be, I guess, very, very active within the school environment, whether it's to consider teaching as a career choice or for civil society organizations to really have programs where they interact with children after school. I really want to commend. I know we have the social worker, Miss Hall. She has a little gentleman's club where she
Mhm.
gets men to come into the primary school and talk to the children. And we need a lot more of these programs. Sometimes even that presence makes a big difference.
Uh, I'm going to skip to you, Jomo. Your thoughts on that feedback from Fabian.
I think we need to think about how we get men involved in terms of things like teaching, etc. So I think that is a larger policy issue. And what's tended to happen in terms of a variety of different professions is that more and more there's been more women. One, because those professions have sort of lost status and they actually experience lower pay. A lot of men can go into plumbing and carpentry and make a lot more money than a teacher who is there, who is the woman, right? So we also need to think about how we incentivize both men and women in terms of entering the teaching force.
Now, in the last 2 days, we saw an initiative that is put on by a primary school in Barbados, and there was a social worker who made an appearance at that school, and he made somewhat of a correlation between what's happening in Barbados in terms of gun violence and there being so much violence happening with a lot of young men in our society. He kind of tried to make a link between that and fatherlessness. Is there evidence to show that this is a part of what's happening, or this is what's playing into what's happening with our young people being more and more in front of the courts, you know, getting more and more involved in violent activity? Is there evidence at all to support that these challenges could be as a result of or in part because of fatherlessness?
There is a connection between trauma that includes fatherlessness or unavailability of parents and acting out behavior, and that includes delinquency. So, a very natural thing when people feel disconnected and harmed and hurt is that they're going to look for connection outside the home. Unfortunately, for a lot of young people, they go to connections that are going to cause trouble.
Fabian, your thoughts?
Fatherlessness plays a part in it, but it is not the only thing. Behaviors are influenced by so many aspects of the environment. And, we have the influence of media, we have the influence of the communities, we have the influence of music. I mean, there are so many different influences that impact the behaviors of these young men. So I wouldn't want to just lean to one particular aspect. However, fatherlessness is also a component of that. we spoke about it. The void that is left, the hurt, the pain, the absence of that male figure being able to, I guess, teach that child, the emotional connection and emotional components of men, how men interact with people, how they interact with the relationships, how they build relationships, how they deal with conflict, how they manage, um, I guess, various situations. How men deal with situations and how women deal with situations is so different, and that, with fatherlessness, that void becomes so great. But it is not the only reason. I am of the firm opinion that we are moving away rapidly from that spiritual foundation that would have kept us as a people, and which have, I guess, would have really created a foundation for us in our moral and value, in our morals and values as a people. And a lot of these things are dwindling, and there's very little regard for life. I think video games even have a bigger role to play. We are normalizing negative behaviors. We're normalizing shooting and killing, and it is okay for a child to play a game to kill a man or to kill a woman and to smile about it because it's a joke. So when we encourage these type of things, then and we see these violent behaviors, well, that it is a combination of things within the society, and we have to be very candid about what the issues are.
Now, a term that's been bandied about quite a bit of late, Jomo, is toxic masculinity. And I know it's been around for quite some time, where I believe it speaks to men overly compensating in the kind of machismo, these roles that we talked about, these gender roles of maybe proverbially killing an ant with a sledgehammer, as they would say, in terms of how they're presented, or what we see, whether in the said video games or in popular media and things like that. Do you think that this also has a role in how we're seeing men engage with their children, or whether they engage with their children, where they might feel as though they might be seen as soft or not manly if they perform in traditional roles that are seen as roles for women? Maybe taking care of the children, taking them off to school, looking after them in the evening, going to these parenting programs that we hear a lot about and often see a lot of women showing up for. Could that be a part of the challenge as well?
I think we mentioned that earlier in terms of the fact that men are taught to be particular ways, and there are a variety of different ways to be a man, no? Yeah, in terms of the society. But one of the things is that we also teach a lot of men that they shouldn't be in connection with their feelings, they shouldn't be vulnerable. That has an impact in terms of the man and his own well-being and health, but it also has an impact in terms of his availability to his children. Yeah, if I can't be soft, if I can't be vulnerable, and it's going to be harder for me to be able to recognize my girl. I'll use my own example, my own girl child's feelings, right? And also be soft and be responsive to her when the time comes.
All right, it's time for another break. Remember, you can get in with your calls and comments. If you have any questions for the panel, we welcome them as well. That's all coming up after this next break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the People's Business. This evening, we're taking a look at fatherhood, parenting from a male perspective. Fabian Sargeant is founder and president of the Men's Empowerment Network Support, or MENS organization, and Jomo Phillips is a respective couple and family counselor joining us in the discussion. Remember, you can come in with your questions or comments on 228-5562 or 228-5563. Now, we know that there can be legal barriers, and we hinted at this before, to fathers being involved with their children, whether it's through custody arrangements, visitation after separation, things of that nature. But we often hear many people saying that the court system, the legal system, laws are set up in women's favor. Do we hear a lot of men complaining about things of that nature, Fabian, based on your engagement through your organization?
Complain all the time about the challenges that they face in the court, and there's a perception that the system is skewed in the direction of the woman or the female or the mother of the child. What sometimes can be the challenge is that I try to get men to understand that they need to, I guess, get familiar with the system and understand how to approach the legal system. Sometimes men approach the system in a way where there's no records, where they, I guess, use emotion and just words to try to plead the case. And women show up with documents in hand, and that is where sometimes a lot of men fall down. But yes, there is a perception that the system is still skewed in direction of the women, where they believe that women are the better nurturers, women are the ones who should care, should have care control of the child most of the time, and men often feel as if they are not treated fairly.
Jomo, when we talk about legal barriers, where does that fall in terms of how people see it in your engagement with couples and families and therapy?
I'm certainly thinking about just sort of my work with men in terms of therapy. And a lot of men do have that experience of feeling very resentful in terms of the court system. But again, I think it is related to policy related issues and just sort of the values that we have in society. People in the courts have been socialized, and one of the things that they might expect is that women are more competent in terms of appearance. Of course, that's not necessarily true, right? But very often, access and custody is provided to women.
Now, you guys also mentioned it, I think, Fabian, a little more earlier in the program, where we talked about how men are portrayed in uh, popular media, on social media, or mainstream media, or whatever. And I know just a week ago, as we look to celebrate Father's Day, I mentioned myself on another program that I found when we're celebrating Father's Day, people often have many conversations about what men should do to be better fathers. But when we're celebrating mothers, it is often a lot of conversation around how great mothers are. So the negativity usually comes out when we're talking about fathers on Father's Day, and not necessarily same for mothers. That's my personal observation. What's your take on things, especially when you say things like in popular media, the way men are portrayed can help to take away from them really wanting to get involved or being able to even get involved in the way that they want to, Fabian?
How men portray themselves sometimes on social media, honestly, um, it leaves a very negative taste in I guess in the mouths of people. And I guess because negativity is what sells, this is what the I guess the algorithms usually push, and once you go on, you see all of these things, and these images really leave a lot to be desired, and that is not necessarily the reality of how men are. Sometimes you see videos with men leaving children, men being very irresponsible, And that is not always the case. And the fact that these things really paints a picture in the minds of the audience, that contributes to the fact that people say, well, or I should say, they have little regard for fathers. Um, but again, we have to acknowledge the fact that men are changing and men are being very positive. Men are being a lot more active. And this is where I would really like social media and media generally to start putting the attention on. Let us look at the positive side of fatherhood. Let us really look at the men that are doing a fantastic job. Only yesterday, the Men Empowerment Network support honored 10 fathers. And we thought that we need to honor fathers. We talk about honoring mothers, but we have to honor fathers too. And understand that fathers play a critical role in the development of the children within the society.
All right, we're going to take another break here, and when we come back, we're going to look at the way forward. I know we talked a lot about, what we have to do in terms of making what's wrong, rather. But I think it's time now for us to talk a little bit about what we can do. What are some of the recommendations to be able to get things where they are? I'm going to leave that with you, Jomo. Quickly share with us, what would you say is the major thing we need to do to be able to change perception about men, about fathers, and about how fathers can be far more involved?
Yeah, a variety of things. One, remembering that men, we have feelings, we have vulnerabilities. Those are important resources and tools in terms of connecting with our children. Two, recognizing that there are policy things and rules and laws that may all prevent men from having the real role that they need to have in terms of the lives of their children, and at the institutional level as well too. How we start to create schools and environments where men are included just as much as women.
All right, final word. You have 20 seconds, Fabian. I don't know how quickly you can do this, but top of the table, if you had one thing to choose that would make a difference, what would it be?
Impact our school boys, our young boys. These young boys will become fathers very soon. And we need to have something in our secondary schools, particularly as they go through adolescence, to explain to them what it means to be a father, the importance, and really engage them in conversation about family.
I think it says a great deal too that we didn't get the amount of calls that we usually do on the program tonight. A lot of the times when we delve into conversations like this, people prefer to sit back for fear of criticism or whatever else. But as we wrap up tonight's discussion,
It's
it's clear
cricket
that
night as well.
fathers play a crucial role in shaping the future of our society through their insights and shared here by Fabian Sargeant and Jomo Phillips. I certainly hope you gained a deeper understanding of some of the challenges and opportunities that fatherhood presents right here in Barbados. So let's continue to support and celebrate the fathers in our lives as they play an essential role in building strong families and communities. I want to thank both of you for joining us and giving us of your time today, and thank you for tuning in. That's the People's Business. Join us next time.